the account numbers in like numerical order, and I was like, I have like 50 of them, and I'm like, this is not here. Fine.
For example, before the finance, like the BOE, like now we begin, please stand for pledge of allegiance. Pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice. The members of the public and Board of Ed will go first and present the town of Madison. Not yet, right, but very soon. And then we'll go through, and at the end we'll take your questions. So I'm John Picard. We have Matt Gordon there, the one with the jacket and tie, looking really nice over there. Bob Donahue, Jude Heston, John Rasmus, Bob Reinhardt, and John Muller is virtual. I know he's flying somewhere or traveling somewhere, but John is with us. So I'd like to thank the Board of Finance members. I know we have a lot of work to do. Thank them for being here. I can't see what's behind me. If you go to the overall budget process.
Maybe we can move the,
Up, it's not.
I don't know why it's not doing that. Move the podium.
Yeah.
I don't want my back.
Yeah.
Not that I don't trust you. That's just the thing.
Yeah.
So we go to the next slide. This budget process, they'll tell you, starts like for next year now, but it starts in September to December. The administrators get together. The BOE does workshops. The Board of Selectmen does the same. The budget workshops are now. The BOF will continue through the budget workshops. We'll have another public hearing, and then in April we'll have a referendum, and I'll give you the exact date. Town budget has been approved by the Board of Selectmen. The public schools and Board of Education budget has been approved by the Board of B and the Board of Selectmen. Right now, the Board of Finance is currently will be holding workshops, and matter of fact, we'll have one this evening after this meeting. There'll be a second Board of Finance public hearing on March 31st. The Board of Finance will recommend the fiscal 27 budget. The referendum will be April 28th. And after that referendum, the Board of Finance will set the mill rate. It's important to understand we do want to hear from you. We have public hearings. You can email us. You can attend the meetings. Let us know what's important to you. It's extremely important for us to understand and know what you're looking for. For the Board of Finance, as you're going to hear the presentations this evening, our job is to take a hard look at revenues and a hard look at the expenses. And do everything we can. You're going to see a couple things. I don't want to take anything away from the superintendent or the mayor, selectmen, excuse me. But you're going to see health insurance. I think on the Board of Ed side, the general education went up just as much as the Board of health insurance. The one was $1 million something, almost exactly the same numbers, and that's with us using some of our reserve funds. So that's a big part. Same thing on the town side. You're going to see it went up pretty substantially. You're also going to see on the town side where our debt service went up substantially, but thanks to, I would say, our first selectman, Stacy Novich and Kristen here, they do a phenomenal job with the Madison investment plan. You're going to see the capital side come down. And that started several years back. I think Gene, Peggy, Stacy, myself all met. So I want to say thank you for that. So for right now, we have our superintendent here, Dr. Cook. I'd like to come up and present the Board of Education budget for fiscal 27, please.
Thank you, Chairman Picard, and thank you for everybody for the opportunity tonight. It's great to be here after our previous meeting got snowed out, and we're dealing with rain right now. But so that's a better outlook for where we're at. Some of these slides, I know boards have seen before, but I know we have some new faces in the audience tonight, so it's good. I will go over them and answer any questions at the end that you may have. So. Just kind of in terms of what we are looking at, I apologize if I'm in anyone's way here. I think we always on the board side want to show like what the funding we're receiving, what that's buying, what that is doing. And so we'd love to go over the recent achievements of our students. I could talk all night and spend 3 hours on that. I will spend about 3 minutes on that, which doesn't give it its due, but it's incredibly impressive what is happening in our school buildings. We have a recommended budget, as was shared earlier. We do start our budget process, seems like earlier every year. It did start in September and really even earlier than that in some ways, but started in earnest in September. As mentioned, health insurance is our big story this year. When we put together this budget, we were looking at a 6% budget. And so we've actually made reductions before getting to what you'll see tonight as our request. And then kind of just wrapping up. But next slide shows our recent achievements in terms of what's going on in our schools. We had very high SAT scores, 2 years ago, last year, incredibly that it jumped again. And so we are consistently in the top 10 of all school districts in Connecticut when you look at our SAT scores. SBA, that's the test that our students in grades 3 through 8 take. 4 in the state overall, and number 5 in the state in math, 4 in the state in English language arts. So just incredible results. Polson was the top of our DERG in every test that they took. And so, our 6th, 7th, and 8th graders just did incredibly well. Thank you. Really, really great work on their part. And we are a DERG B. There's reference groups in Connecticut, and so there's other districts that they compare us to. If we were reshuffled today, if the state went through that process again, we've been ranked as a DERG A, in large part because of our results, and that is the highest ranking, best ranking districts in the state in terms of academics. Always love to show other things that our students do. Athletics, 6 state championships last year, 2 conference championships. Our music and our students have done incredibly well and achieved results in national recognition in many cases for what they've done. We also did all this while we were moving every staff member from pre-K to 5. So every staff member last year moved in some form or fashion. Most moved buildings, some moved even across the hall, but that was pretty rare. Everybody pretty much moved throughout. So you can imagine the disruption a lot of districts would use that as an excuse. We did not, and we achieved as well as we were going through a lot going on. And I think something we overlook a lot is that Daniel Hand was reaccredited without issue, without major recommendation for facilities work or things like that. There's some recommendations in there, and we've on the process of addressing those. But just a great report to receive that our high school is continue to be accredited for another 10 years. Next slide is an overview of where things are financially, since that's what we're really here to talk about today. You'll see that the line items are pretty much moving at a pretty reasonable pace. I will show in future slides how we have been one of the lowest percentage increases in the state over the last 6, 7 years. Really been mindful of our spend, and as I said, we looked at a 6% increase as we started this, but we made some adjustments to health insurance and consult with the town, and are at 4.24%. That will be when we are all said and done. I am very confident that will be below state average again, below average in our DERG, below average in our area, and that's again a testament to the work that we do throughout the year on budgeting, collective bargaining agreements, everything that we do. So in comparison, next slide shows our budget, as I mentioned, where we compare over the years to our DERG, our district reference group, state average, and cost of living, the CPI, in terms of what we are buying. So the money that we have in certain accounts that are buying things each year, they're buying less, as you can imagine, just like your home budget over the years. They are buying less than they were years ago, and we haven't always been able to keep up with inflation in those accounts. In terms of the next slide, we look at the annual budget comparison, because I've had some questions on this. Last year was really our year to achieve savings due to the rework. So this year we have 4 buildings, next year we have 4 buildings. So that savings from closing 3 buildings and opening 1 new one has already occurred in our budget process. We are dealing with a little bit more students than we had a year ago. We are dealing with just about the same square footage. So the costs that drive those, the drivers of that have still continued. This reorg, as when we went into it, was never meant to, provide a major savings, but we did have a very low budget increase last year, and we did utilize some staff reductions that on that. The other story that led to last year's low budget was a negative in health insurance costs. So we had a very slight negative increase in health insurance costs. That's always been attributed to our work with our collective bargaining agreement. So our employees in Madison pay a pretty high percentage of their health insurance. So our teachers pay 24%. That's one of the highest in the state in terms of what they contribute towards health insurance. We've done plan design changes. We've done a lot of work. You'll just see that this is our year that we hit that higher number based on experience. So what happens in this budget? We no longer have debt savings, so we paid off the annual hand, which is really good news. But in prior years, we did have debt savings as we paid off as debt decreased over the years. Our regular operating costs are pretty much the same. We do have some staffing reductions, as I shared, and I'll talk a little bit more about as we go on. A significant increase in health insurance. We did have the reduction of our 3 buildings. So the Board of Ed, which was a great plan, held on to our 3 school buildings that we closed until January 1, and then we turned those over to the town. So we had some cost in there based on keeping those buildings going and keeping electricity. And so now that has transitioned. So we saw some savings in that area. And then we reduced a small amount for maintenance of the 3 buildings that we no longer continue to. And again, a reminder for that, we knew this reorg was coming forward, so we didn't really have a large maintenance budget for Jeffrey Ryerson and TCLC. And we have put in for next year an increase in utilities for Polson, because as we know, we are doing some work this summer that will cause higher utility costs as we have air conditioning throughout the building. So we will have air conditioning throughout the district, except for a few locations at Polson going forward. So that's really exciting, because there's nothing worse than having a disruption to the educational process because of heat and the atmosphere. So our next slide just is another way to kind of illustrate some of the costs and major factors. So as I mentioned, there were some reductions. We have a teacher's contract that is keeping pace with the teacher's contracts throughout the area. We had reduced paraprofessionals throughout some positions, mostly ones that we were unable to fill. And those are in grades 4 through 12. They are not impacting a very popular program where we have paraprofessionals in classrooms K through 3. But there's been, a number of positions that we just had not been able to fill, and they've been on our, on our recruitment list, on our books for a while, and it's really made financial sense at this point to not continue to try and fill those positions. And then, as we anticipated a year ago, as we've done so much studying of incoming students and watching the trajectory, we knew we'd have to add 2 teachers to Neck River for next year, and also a 2nd grade teacher, but we were able to decrease a teacher in pre-K at Brown and a 2nd grade teacher at Brown. So a net addition of 1 elementary teacher is the entire increase for the whole district. Next slide talks about that health insurance. We've kind of been priming that for a little while here. It's the highest increase I've seen in my career, 21.5%. We've worked really hard to mitigate this as best as possible. The town, as we have been in, and I will say throughout the town, and its work is very good at budgeting, very forward-thinking, conservative, and we have a reserve fund for health insurance for basically these reasons. And so, working with the town, we are going to utilize $800,000 of that health insurance. If we did not do that, we'd be looking at a 6% increase for next year, which we thought was not manageable. A little bit more on health insurance. As you'll see, we have beat the market 9 out of 11 years. So we've had 2 years of spikes, 16, 17, and then next year. And so, that again is attributed to the work we've been doing on this, the health of our employees and reduction of the employees over the years too, as we've had declining enrollment. So that has helped decrease health insurance costs, but it is a year that we're hitting those higher numbers. Unfortunately, this is not uncommon. I know colleagues, other districts that we border that have been seeing this for 3-4 years in a row. So we've been very fortunate. It's just too bad this is the year that we're seeing this. Also, an area that we have really worked well and hard on in terms of saving costs, looking at solutions, keeping Madison students in Madison. So this is our students that are placed outside of our district for special ed. And so this is always a big budget driver, but again, I think this has been a pretty reasonable amount that we've increased over the years. Our students, when they leave our district, where they go, they have increases cost of tuition where the student is attending. So that's a factor of this, and then also the number of students that go out to outside placements. Our next slide highlights our facilities. So lots going on in facilities, lots of moving parts, in this area. So as I mentioned, there's a reduction in utilities and maintenance for TCLC, Jeffrey, and Ryerson. That's half a year for that utilities for those two buildings and the maintenance accounts. Utilities at Neck River were a little bit under as we got closer to opening the building. We were able to make some reductions and are anticipating a reduction for next year. And as we have more actual numbers going forward. And again, please remember when we put these numbers out here, these are from November. Like these are numbers we're building in November, anticipating utilities for basically 18 months in the future. So a lot of hard work goes into this. We work closely with Eversource on that. Our remaining utilities go up, just as they do at all of our homes, each year. And so that's the anticipation of a 3% in electricity and 5% in gas. And then there's the increase for Polson, as I explained before, for that. In terms of other factors, transportation goes up every year. We studied this, we looked at this recently, and hopefully our transportation provider isn't watching this presentation, but we have one of the lowest transportation costs in the area. We looked at this again recently, and we are really in a good place. 4% is a contractual increase. We have another year, and then we'll need to renegotiate that contract. I expect those numbers to increase as we go forward. This is the next line item is a decrease of $109,000 for reading materials we bought last year, for this year. So we're able to decrease that next year. And then athletics. So each year athletic costs go up, as you can imagine. Transportation, as we've had declining enrollment over the years, we have less students on our sports teams, but they still go, very far in the state tournament, as I shared, or onto the championship. So we don't have as many students pay to participate, which is on the next slide. I'd like to talk a little bit about that. As the board and the administration entered into this budget, our plan was to eliminate pay to participate. We are one of only 3 towns in our conference to have this cost passed on to families. So each student that plays a sport has a cost to pay to participate. Our plan going into this budget, before we saw the final numbers, was to eliminate that or severely decrease that. Maybe stop at the middle school first or look at other areas. But we did not feel we could put that forward, so that was a deferred request for next year. Sports like hockey and skiing pay more because they have more costs, but other teams pay that as well. We had, we go out to each department each year and ask what they were looking for. They are very reasonable in what they put forward. But we had some furniture cost and music department requests. We will look at that if we have end of the year funds to do. And then we had requests from the schools for 2 additional elementary teachers, and we felt we could not put that in this budget. We still may need them. So we will continue to watch elementary enrollment and have to make adjustments if we if we see enrollments increase, continue to increase at the level that we've seen. Our next slide is just another way to show how these increases are coming through accounts and what they where the impact really is. As said before, personnel and benefits is just barely above health insurance. That's not typically the case. That be much larger than the health insurance cost. Next slide shows our requested increase, the board's approved budget versus other board approved budgets. So most of these are board approved budgets at this point. We track those throughout to see how we compare. And as you can see, even though it's higher for what we have requested in recent years, it's on the very low end of other districts. And then when you go beyond our area, we see requests in the low teens, for the full budget, 10%. It's not uncommon to see those as districts are dealing with pretty significant cost increases. And then our last slide for tonight, just again, I think it's important to show where we've been. Very low. We've made reductions in each of those years to get to those numbers. So each year we're looking at things that we can't do. We spend a lot of time on this. Just about every conversation I have with my administrative team is about budgets and how can we save some money? How can we do things a little differently to make sure we're delivering the same education to students at a reasonable cost? So
Thanks, Doc.
thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. So at the end, a lot of questions.
Public, now it's first elected. Peggy Lyons, come on up. Tom Madison.
All right, thank you.
Great.
Sure. Okay. Jeannie's you're doing the path again?
Yes.
Okay, to get it. All right, well, I just want to say, welcome everybody. And thank you for the opportunity to present the recommended budget for Board of Selectmen. We have here, Al Goldberg, Bruce Wilson, and Jen Gordon, and then Scott Murphy's online. And I want to thank the board because I think we had a really productive, great conversations going through. The process for the town is typically I send out a notification letter to all the town departments giving budget guidance. And part of that is, issues, concerns, way to save. And I ask the staff to kind of really look at their budget before they submit it. And then they put forward some additional budget requests. I take all that together, I vet through it, and then I end up putting together a recommended budget that I present to the Board of Selectmen in January. And then the Board of Selectmen comes together and kind of deliberates further, make some compromises. We have some presentations from outside groups, and then pull together a final budget that we want to move forward in the process. So tonight, that's what this budget is. So we really try to be mindful of the needs of the town, and we use our strategic plan as kind of a North Star to do that. And so the goal was to just develop a responsible budget that reflects our community needs and priorities based on the strategic plan, but also continue to plan for future needs. Big planner, as everybody knows, and we're in the midst of facility planning. We're in the middle of planning for the surf club. And the budget allows for that. We have a pool of money that we use to pay consultants and experts to help us develop those plans. And that planning process helps us look out more than just each year's budget. We look out 5 years. And then we also tie that into the capital planning process, which also is going on parallel in the December-January timeframe. It's done through a volunteer committee in town. That also includes members of the different elected boards. So that's our capital planning process. We're always trying to minimize that tax increase. And I know there was a lot of concern and fear in the public when the town voted to move forward with some of the referendum projects about tax spikes and, how are we going to pay for all this new debt? I mean, you'll see the debt ramp up, or as you go through and look at the numbers, we're paying more and more interest expense as we issue more bonds to pay for some of the improvement projects in town. But we've been planning. That's what we do. And a couple of years ago, as John alluded to, we sat down, and that included our former chair, Gene Fitzgerald, and with Stacy, and came together with this Madison investment plan. And the strategy of that is helping us to mitigate those tax increases, using all the tools in our toolbox so that we don't have to see those big spikes in the mill rate and to absorb that debt as it comes on board each year. So that's all part of good disciplined planning. And then also tapping outside funds. We've been very aggressive over the last 5 years of bringing in outside money to help pay for some of those projects so that we don't have to tax Madison taxpayers to get these projects done. So the town has been very successful and focused on them. And then we're always looking at things to, operationally improve how we do things. You'll see every couple of years we do some town reorganization, staff realignments, things like that, trying to maximize the value for the town and improve services for everybody. So the next slide is just highlighting the budget itself. So this year we're recommending an operating budget of about $27.8 million. That's about a 2.5% increase from the previous year. The previous year, it also went up around 2.5%. And then when you add in the cost of capital, which includes the rising interest expense, you can see on here debt service is going up about $1.5 million. We're now reducing what we're putting into our capital account. So we're offsetting that a lot. So we'll see a slight increase in capital, but it's not going to be the full amount because we've managed our contributions to our capital investment fund. So now we're kind of coming down on what we're putting into the savings account as we take on the interest expense. So that means we don't see those big spikes in the budget. So the total town budget is going up about 2.8%. And similar to what Dr. Cook just talked about, we pool with the town. So our healthcare expenses are also seeing a huge increase. And that's driven by two things. One is just medical costs, right? We all know that healthcare is going through the roof. Everywhere in the country is experiencing this. The costs are just out of control. But in addition to that, we're self-funded. It's experience rate as well. So our employees, we're going through a period right now where our employees are using the healthcare services more than they had in the previous few years. And that's just based on we're a small population by a number of employees that are in the pool. We're self-insured. So that really hit us hard this year. And I wish I had your chart, Dr. Cook, that you showed earlier, the history. So you show, a lot of people ask, well, why are we self-insured? Should we be self-insured? Well, the reality is it's helped us in the long run because we've been on the good side of that curve in terms of cost because we've been self-insured. We've only gotten dinged, about 10 years ago, and then this year we're starting to see it. So this 2.5% operating budget increase is also assuming an application of about $200,000 of our reserve, and I'll talk more about that later. So if you put the two budgets together, that would come into a total budget increase of 3.74% if you include the total Board of Education budget. So the next slide actually kind of gives you that trend. And I think, going back to about 2020, my goal has always been to control the growth of the operating budget and to slow it down. When I came into office, the operating budget was going at over 7%. And now we've been able to achieve somewhat sustainable levels in the 2 to 3% range. And that's through just managing the budget really well and doing targeted changes when we can, finding savings when we can. So this kind of shows the pathway, but you can see the trend line for the total budget going down. That's the dotted line, has been a declining trend in terms of the increase of our budget. And then I think the other thing to highlight is some of these spikes on there are having to do with the debt service. The yellow line is the total budget with the capital costs. So you can see around late 2022, 23 is when we started to issue debt. So we saw the spike up, but then we started managing it by reducing capital to keep that operating budget growing at a lower rate. So I think the overall goal here is that, we're seeing the trend moving in the right direction despite all the headwinds. I mean, think about it. This reflects COVID. This reflects hyperinflation for multiple years where we're seeing double-digit inflation rates, and yet we've still been able to keep our budget growing at very, I think, nominal rates. Now, I know that's hard for taxpayers because it's dollars coming out of your pocket, but you have to look at the big picture and look at the trends. The town is doing really well at managing its expenses. And that demonstrates that we've been able to do that. So the next slide just takes a little deeper dive into this. With the overall operating budget going up or about $1 million, what's driving that? And basically, salary and benefits on our budget make up almost 70% of the cost of the town. But you can see, if you put together personnel and health insurance costs, that makes up roughly 56% of the growth, even though our total cost base is 70%. The other piece is capital, and that's what really is driving the growth because we have those interest expense coming into the budget, causing, the budget to grow. And that's something that the town voted on. The town opted to spend this money. So I think this gives you just a good picture of what's driving it. Other operational costs are going up, but at a much smaller rate. We're managing things well. We are absorbing the 2 new buildings that the Board of Ed is seeing some savings on. The town is having to take on. We have some nominal operating costs for those 2 buildings. So that's kind of a negative for us, but a plus for them. And so if we go to the next slide, this will give you a little bit more deeper dive into numbers. And I call this a walkthrough. I like to look at it, start last year, where are the numbers coming from, getting to this year's. And so you can kind of see the growth. So healthcare, and that number includes other benefits as well. That's almost a $500,000 increase for our budget. That's a big number on our budget. Applying that reserve fund will help mitigate that. And that's what that reserve fund is for. We don't dip into reserves a lot, but the whole purpose of that is when we have good years, we pile the money away and save for the rainy day. It's been a rainy day, it's storming, it's a blizzard, right? So it's time to tap into the reserve fund. So as you can see, some of the other operational costs that has to do with adding the 2 town buildings, just utilities, we're experiencing the same utility costs, although we have seen savings from our investment in geothermal in this building. We have not seen those spikes that perhaps we might have seen with costs because this is a highly efficient building. And I think we've been really pleasantly surprised with the benefit of making that conversion last year to geothermal. There's a few requests that came in from the fire departments. We have the new emergency operations center in addition. It's going to be going online this year. So that's going to cause a few more utility costs and things like that between Madison Place building. And then the library, they're saying also, this assumes a kind of a growth of roughly what our budget is growing at for their operational. So they have the same things. They have personnel cost increase, healthcare increase, normal contractual obligations. So this reflects that they're going to need to fund some of those growth items as well in their budget. Staffing, everybody asks. The only thing this budget includes is first of all, the social worker position that we had a very public conversation with both boards and agreed we wanted to absorb that. We started it in the spring of this year as a full-time position. And that's fully built into the budget for next year with some offsets from the grants. We're kind of stringing the grants along to mitigate the impact on the budget. And then in the next year's budget, there'll be a full absorption of the cost of that. And then we did a reorganization, what I call town operations. That's a division that we have here in town, and there's multiple departments underneath that. We've shifted some personnel around, changed some responsibilities, and that resulted in a half an FTE increase. I want to highlight the first bullet point. Over the last 7 or 8 years, we've grown roughly 5.5 FTEs. 4 of those are police department. So, or no, 5 of them are police department. 5. So we've really grown, well, it was 0.8, I think. 0.8 FTEs outside of the police department over the last 8 years. So I know there's this, government is growing, they're adding all these people, all these position changes. The FTEs have really not changed outside of the police department, but that was a public priority, a board priority to invest and expand our police department. And we had multiple discussions about that over several budgets where we've been slowly adding to get our number of officers added to them. So this budget really doesn't have, and that whole reorganization does not really have an impact. It's not adding a big expense. It's all paid for within the budget of the department in terms of the changes. The next slide just highlights, once again, I presented this at the town meeting, if anybody had the opportunity to see that fabulous presentation. But it just goes through all the things that the town is doing, what this money is paying for. These are from our strategic plan. These were goals that were laid out. I mean, look at all NPS schools, named schools of distinction. Look at the presentation that Dr. Cook just made, all the accolades our schools are getting, the high level of educational services that we're providing for the community. That's what these budgets do. They're funding that and allows us to achieve those things. The planning processes, that's what those planning dollars are for, to invest in these things so we can deliver on the objectives that the residents told us they wanted to. So this just lays out all the different good things going on in town that are being funded by the budget and that align with our strategic plan. So you can go on to the next. You get people. These will be available on the website if you want to read them. But you can go on to the next slide. And then this is also something I present this probably 2 or 3 times a year. I won't go through it again. What the Madison investment plan. It's all these different tools that we use to try to keep that mill rate down as much as possible. And there's a lot of discussion about fund balance, and the Board of Finance has a lot of debate about it. The Board of Selectmen has a lot of debate about it. I'll be talking a little bit about how we think we should use it. We're always trying to use it strategically so we don't have to tax people more. This is money that was already taxed, right? It's been collected from the taxpayers. So why would we want to tax more money to pay for something? Let's use the money that we already taxed for. So that's part of the strategy of the Madison investment plan. So we'll move on to the next slide, just talking about the debt service. I highlighted this. This is kind of where we are now. By the end of this fiscal year, we'll have about $65 million in total debt. Vast majority of that is tied to the Madison School Renewal Plan. We do have $6.7 million that's related to Academy. I know a lot of questions came out. Why did you issue money for Academy? It wasn't settled. No, it was settled. We had the authorization to do it. We can't just issue debt overnight. You have to plan ahead. You have to plan your cash flows. So if the referendum, we weren't even sure we were going to referendum when we issued these bonds for Academy that was issued in December of 2024. So we weren't even sure if we were going to referendum. We knew we had 16 million in bonding, and we had to plan for if we pulled the trigger. We had just gone out to bid, and so we needed to make sure we had the funds to start the process. So now that money, that $6 million, $6.7 million, is some of it's been spent already on about $1 million has already been spent in terms of the planning that was needed for Academy and all the construction design plans and things like that. The rest of it is sitting there. It's generating interest, and it's pretty much offsetting the costs, right? So we're not like negative in terms of having that bonding sitting there. But now as a town, we'll have to decide, how do we want to redeploy that money? Do we want to use it for another project? Or do we just want to pay it off? So those are discussions as we identify upcoming capital needs. The Board of Selectmen will be talking about, the Board of Finance, and then ultimately we'll have to get approval by the voters about how to use that money. So that'll be a continuing conversation that we have over the next couple of years, I shouldn't say a couple of years, the next year. The other thing I want to highlight is just the debt service, and we saw this doubled. This is doubled now. So we went up $1.5 million in this year's budget because we're coming towards the end. We finished the most expensive part of the Madison School Renewal Plan, and that was the new school, the beautiful new school. So we needed to have all the funds to pay everybody. That got done. We're starting Polson, most of the work at Polson this summer, and that's going to continue over 2 to 3 summers. And we've completed most of the work in Brown. So this number will keep going up. We'll do another debt issuance at the end of this year. And then the interest expense from debt issuance will probably peak in 2030, I think it is. So going on to the next slide to talk a little bit about capital. The CIP plan was passed by the committee and recommended to the Board of Selectmen. The Board of Selectmen approved the capital plan for this year. Basically, I think this bar chart highlights really well how we're balancing investing in our capital funds, which is basically savings accounts to pay for projects, versus using debt to pay for it. It's just 2 different sources of how to pay for something. But you can see here, this is as the debt service gets up, where the blue bar is what we're putting into the savings account. So we're saving less for the capital projects and we're increasing more in terms of the debt service. So that's how we can kind of streamline and smooth out our capital needs over the next couple of years without hitting the mill rate too hard. This is where the capital plan, the breakdown you can see between education is obviously the largest piece of the pie. Well, it's actually not. The public works is now the largest piece of the pie. But this is the 5-year plan and kind of the mix of the different projects. This does not reflect what may come out of the Surf Club master planning process or the facilities planning process. This is fixing roads, new fire trucks, different projects the school has already been talking about that they've submitted. So this is just a snapshot of those things that are in the existing capital plan, and it's not taking into account some of these bigger picture items that the town is going to go through a process and deciding to prioritize to do. In terms of next slide is I talked about the Madison investment plan, trying to use that fund balance to pay for things so we don't have to put it into the budget. We don't want to tax people more when we have money in our reserve funds to pay for it. So one of the things that has been, I know, an ongoing concern of all residents is the roads. They're like, our roads are horrible. There's too many potholes. There's too many. We need to pave more roads. We in 2024, we actually hired a consultant to do an assessment of all the roads in Madison and find out what our rating was. It came back at around 71, which we were told was a pretty good rating and very comparable to communities of our size and kind of demographics. But we feel we could do more, right? We feel that, and especially the cost of repairing or paving roads is going up. And who knows what the impact's going to be now that we're in this global conflict situation in terms of oil prices. So it's oil, it's driven by oil prices, it's asphalt. So we feel that we need to be proactive and put more money into our road paving accounts. And so one of the things we laid out is, so the study group, they said to get our rating up to say around a 75, we would have to put in around 8 million. I think it was like $8 million or $5 million infusion and then $1 million spend over the next couple of years. And we thought, okay, that's a big number, 5 million. Let's step back and come up with a more pragmatic way, knowing what our resources are. And so staff came up with a recommendation of doing an infusion, $1 million this year, $1 million again the next year, and then tapping some of these and then fixing the budget, which is what we have down here, 5 million in the CIP budget, which is $1 million a year, using some of the excess fund balance in our paving account, and then doing these special appropriations, one in 2026 and one in 2027. So that special appropriation has to be approved at town meeting. And so that's what, we just did one in January, another appropriation of $750,000 for this account as well. So we're trying to just beef that account up so that as we do our road paving, we can do more roads. And then we also know the cost is increasing as well. So this was a plan that was submitted to the CIP, and I think they approved this, right, as is through the CIP committee. And so this, if the budget gets approved, the budget is just 1 year, but this $1 million is something that we will have to take to town meeting to get approval for. Doesn't mean that if it doesn't get approved at town meeting, that we don't have enough money to pay for the roads. We do. This is just to use the savings account, put more money in the savings account so we can maybe get more done that we'd like to get done versus sticking with what's in the budget, right? So that's what the kind of $1 million a year type appropriation. So people will expect a town meeting to come to this probably over the summer to approve the extra $1 million so we can get that road rating. If we don't get it done, then our road rating will still probably stay around. We'll still pave the roads. We'll still get things done. It's just not going to be as many that we'd like to do. Another appropriation that we've been doing this for several years now, the next page, is the Coastal Resiliency Fund. We set this up as a special fund for projects that are impact our coastal areas. And it is, what's nice about it is that we can actually get a higher interest rate on money that we put into that. It was a special thing allowed by the legislature. So we decided, let's take that, set it up, and start putting some money aside there for projects that qualify for that. So we've been putting about $125,000 into that. We've already paid for some of this. Do you recall what we pulled out of coastal resiliency? We've already paid for planning. We've used the money for the Middle Beach Road drainage project, and then we're going to be coming back. Hopefully, that's in CIP to get that project moving. That's a big coastal resiliency project. So that's one that we've done that every year the last couple of years since 2022. The other thing that the board had a lot of discussion about is the register of voters account. As you know, we started early voting last year. That's really changed the cost profile of voting for the town because it requires more staff and more to run an early voting process. There's a lot of other costs involved with it, ballots and all this other stuff. but we also have it's very cyclical though. Last year, we had turnout at 40% for municipal election. This year, we're probably going to have like 80%, right? So the cost of running different elections every year depends if it's constitutional, presidential, municipal. So rather than having this fluctuating thing every year, where some years we have to dip in and add a bunch of money or not and put it into a budget, we try to keep the budget smooth. We said, well, let's set up a fixed money amount that we do for the account every year, and then we dip into a savings account. So some years we're going to be above it, and we're going to need to grab some money out of the savings account, and other years we won't need to touch it. And the money that's left over will just go back into the general fund. So we're proposing $100,000 appropriation to create this kind of fund to kind of offset the peaks and valleys of election cycles. And then the third thing is Meals on Wheels. We're very fortunate that we got this endowment set up several years ago. The Milton Marcus endowment that paid for it. Meals on Wheels is it's expensive, but it's a fantastic service that is really helping our vulnerable population. But that was all funded through this endowment. We're running out of money, but we need to sustain it. So we're trying to figure out, how much we want to include that in the budget versus having other sources of funds. So the board kind of landed on a $27,000 increase in the budget. That's what we think will get us through next year, but we're really going to need a long-term plan. I was recommending doing something similar to the register, putting a savings account aside, using fund balance once again, money we've already taxed for, setting it aside and having it serve Meals on Wheels. We had a big discussion about it, and I think we want to see, we're also trying to get donor accounts now. The Madison Foundation is now out there. People can donate, to support the Meals on Wheels fund. So we kind of want to see how those donations go before we're making decisions. So we chose to just bump up the budget by $27,000. So the next slide is just kind of really summarizing, in terms of where we are from a mill rate standpoint. I think the town, if you look at that table, I think we get an incredible value for our tax rate. We have some of the best schools in the state. We have probably some of the best beaches in the state. We have an amazing senior center. We have high quality government services. So I think as much as I understand, it is expensive to live in Madison, you are getting great value for your dollar here. And I think this chart demonstrates that. So our goal is to continue that value proposition to keep investing in our town, keep the service level high, but try to make it manageable and affordable as much as we can. So this just kind of highlights that. The Board of Finance's job is to set that mill rate. And they have a lot of tools to do it. They have to look at the budget. They have to look at the revenue streams. They have to look at fund balance, and they kind of pull all these things together and come up with what they think is going to be an appropriate and fair rate that will continue to serve the community but be acceptable. And then obviously you as the residents get to vote on the actual budget. Really the final slide is just the recommendation. I think we've done a really good job at trying to be balanced with this budget, and happy to answer any questions. So.
Thank you, Peggy. Very nicely done. I was at your presentation like 2 weeks ago. You did a great job. Unfortunately, there are people that are bullying. So I'm going to ask Dr. Quick to come back up. First select woman, if you have any questions you'd like to ask them or me or us, as Peggy mentioned just a few seconds ago, the board of finance will look at not only the revenue but also on the expenditure side and work together, but very well to find an appropriate goal rate for the taxpayers. We have a great town here with a lot of services and excellent school system. So I want to thank both our first selectman, Peggy Lyons, and Dr. Cook for being here and doing a great job. So we'll start by actually one second. Yes. Okay. Sorry.
Ready for?
Well, I'll begin by what we'll take the audience here, and I'm going to go back and forth. We have a few people virtually. So if anybody from the public would like to Ask a question, please state your name and address for the record. Name and address, please.
Carrie Vanderbilt here, Bartlett Drive. I have only one question for the board that side, whether questions for the town side.
There, you only get one. Just kidding.
It'll be
Kidding,
one
joking.
sentence.
Little levity, that's all.
The 4.25% increase you mentioned is below average relative to what? In which towns? And I noticed that council. But those towns all have a very high commercial tax base. Madison, that's big. We're putting a lot into education here, but it's funded by a lot of people, including a lot of people that don't have kids in school. You know, so apples to apples. So we're talking 4.25%. You need to compare that to towns that have the same relative commercial to residential tax.
So that's why I try and give multiple different comparisons. So we compare to the state average as well. So I had the state average up there. Also, if we took the shoreline, so similar communities, different sizes and enrollments and things like that, also we'd be much lower. So that's where but I think when I'm talking to parents, they're expecting us to have the results similar to those groups that I have up there. And forgive me, I forgot to mention that Seth Foskin was here, chairman of the board too. So I may call on him to help answer some questions, but depending on the questions come forward. But we do look at everything. We do look at all the different pieces. But when the state puts us into, as best they can, a comparison group, those were the towns. So that's where we frequently compare ourselves to them.
As far as the high health insurance increases, I wonder how much, either on the town or the education level, how much is negotiated to have the actual employees more into it? Because that's done on the private side. How much is that done on this side?
So I will say we, as I shared during the presentation, our teachers pay one of the highest in the state. They pay 24% of that. Administrators, other groups are as well, but that's our largest group. That's 300 teachers. We're also in a high deductible plan that teachers or staff are paying $2,500 out of pocket. So and then we have new plan design changes each contract that address prescriptions. That's one of the big pieces, as you can imagine. So, I've had employees turn down our job offer because of our health insurance, and how, that is a little bit more aggressive than other towns. So I think we've got a pretty good balance. But it is something that people look at. It's the biggest benefit other than salary. Yeah.
On the town side, you say we do a lot of planning and that we're going to look at special appropriations for things like roads, which a lot of people feel should be a priority. So if roads are a priority, why are we not putting that in the budget now? So we have an accurate picture of what the cost is to the townspeople. And why are we paying $3.5 million for a turf fancy baseball field that's going to help a few people who play on that field? That just doesn't make any sense. So shouldn't the budget increases be accurate and show what we're actually going to have to pay rather than going special appropriation after special appropriation, have a town that try to support that in the middle of summer? Again, if you don't end up here to get people, it passes automatically. That's not right. It's not right. Also, want to address the very generous raises for some of the Board of Selectmen of 7%, town engineer 7.7%, police department admin up 18.64%, fire ambulance up 59,000 up to 221,000, fire ambulance technician of 36,000 to 109,000. Town health insurance, we know, of 274,000. And the debt increase of 1.9 billion. The budget doesn't contain money in the CIP yet for surf club renovations or the Department of Public Works garage expansion. That's gonna be about 8.5 million. In the meantime, the ad hoc committee on facilities is suggesting that Ryerson, which was supposed to be closed down, is now gonna be renovated or possibly renovated for storage for the town. Storage? Why do we need more storage? What are we storing? Shouldn't everybody be downsizing? Jeffrey School, 50,000 square feet. It wasn't acceptable for students to be in it, but we're gonna turn it into Madison Academy Services. Okay, but it needs a new roof, new HVAC system. What is that gonna get us? Facilities Committee is recommending the old Memorial Hall be a theater. We have a theater at Polson, Brown, Daniel Hand, Madison Art Farm, Lyric Stage. Why do we need a theater? These are long-term projects, but we're gonna be asked to pay for them. Probably in the form of a special appropriation town meeting that nobody's gonna get able to attend, or we won't get the 150 to attend it, to vote it down, and get 149, and it passes automatically. That was the change in the last chart.
Thank
So,
you.
I was gonna say, that was more of a statement, obviously, than questions, so.
But it's a
I-
question of
Ladies, ladies.
I understand that, I'm just saying, so if you have it written down, if you send me that, I will respond to each of those, or comments that you're making, not necessarily questions. Some of them are though fact-based, and I want to correct some of those facts. So I would suggest you send it to me in writing, and I'd be happy to respond to everything, especially some of the quotes are very misleading about what you're talking about salary increases. Overall salary is not going up that, but there's been reorganizations, there's been new positions, there's been swapping people out. So it's not like somebody's getting a 7% pay increase. So, I think I would like to respond to that specifically. That's getting into a lot of detail in terms of the different departments. And so, happy to do that.
I think what
Okay.
we should do, I don't mean to
Yeah.
interrupt, Mayor, but some of those are excellent questions.
Yeah.
And part of it, we know the budget probably a little bit better than the public
Yeah.
and some public, because some of those are reorganizations, some of those are small portable contractual, so it looks that way. I think if those questions are presented online virtually and everybody can see the answers, it makes it better for everybody, not just two people.
Yeah, well, I think we've done that practice every year. You submit it and then we post it. We did it a couple of years, so.
I think that's the best way to
I think
go.
that's the
Ask
best.
those questions and you know,
Who wants better roads, or who wants baseball?
I'm not going back and forth. I really sorry.
Here, but we're talking about planning and priorities, and we are not doing that here. So,
I think you have your opinion.
hyperinflation. Hyperinflation is Argentina at 149%. We never even got above 9.
With respect, 9 is pretty high historically.
Yeah.
We were quoted double digits.
I'm not gonna go back and forth. Historically, inflation's averaged between 2 and 3%.
We had construction
Maybe.
markets, so.
Anybody else that could present a question? I mean, one more here and then I'll go virtually. Do anybody virtually like to ask a question?
Yes.
Name and address for the record, please.
Go ahead, Jim.
How are you, Jim?
Good. I have a couple of questions for you. One of them in Peggy mentioned.
Your address for the record, please. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Oh, sorry, I must have been muted. Jim Schmaltz, Jonathan's Landing. And Peggy had said that the academy would spend about $1 million. I think it was 1.7 at least, with 500 a day in interest continuing. And it's not a wash, because she also said, I think it was 0.5% interest is all you can earn, where we're paying out 3%. Is that correct?
That's not correct.
No. No, we're able to, we can't earn interest more than what the bonds cost, but we can earn what the bonds cost, and that's a regulatory thing, so.
Oh, I thought in one of the meetings you said we can only earn like 0.6% or something on bond money in interest.
Well, there's certain grant money that you cannot earn interest on because they get grants, Jim, but I'm jumping in here. But that's, if you get a grant, then you're not allowed to earn interest on some of the grants that you see, but I'm not sure.
Yeah,
There's
I don't
confusion.
know what but
Okay, I'll see if I can find that and uh,
We'll
where I
look
saw
into
that. And then on the, like, if we looking at the budget and we looked at last year's budget, we had, I think it was just 5.8 million in special appropriations. So you really have to add that to last year's budget number, correct?
No.
No? Okay, so
I think that the confusion here is these appropriations, the one in the roads account that we've done 3.5 million into CIP. We're putting money into a savings to fund a 5-year capital plan. If we don't have the savings account, we don't spend the money, right? So this is all to add more money to the savings account. If we'd like to spend more money on roads over the next 5 years, we could increase more of what we spend this year to get more roads done. It just means we're going to deplete our savings account, and it's going to impact. So that's
we're
all.
doing that regardless, correct? Because if you're planning to do $1 million special appropriation, if you put it into the budget, so it's guaranteed, pay for it out of the fund balance as pre-taxed or previously taxed income, and then, or the other side is you do it as $1 million special appropriation. It's the same money. It's just where it's falling on the balance sheet. It's all still coming out of that same fund. It would be more appropriate, I think, to have it in the budget. And I don't understand why there is an apprehension to do that.
To me, I'm looking at where we are today, and I don't want to go out and raise the mill rate at a level to get another $1 million when I've got $1 million sitting in the saving in our undesignated fund balance. So
But you don't have to raise the taxes. You can use the previously paid taxes as part of this budget.
But that's what the appropriation is. It's coming from previously taxed money that we have to.
Well, why can't you put that in the budget?
We have to assume a collection rate every year. We assume a collection rate that is lower than what we normally collect every year. That's why the fund balance grows. Plus, we have other revenues, and there's other revenues. So that builds up this extra pile of cash. And so, rather than taxing more money to put it,
So if you want to look at it and
it's just a philosophical difference. So I don't think this is supposed to be a debate on that.
Jimmy, you said you're going to have some questions. The same thing I said, if you have them, I ask them, but if you have them in writing, it'd be nice you can get everyone the answers also.
I submit them in writing and nobody replies.
Jim, if you submit them in writing, I'll make sure somebody replies.
Okay, because that, if you pay the mill rate down, so you'll put 500,000 last year, right? Roughly, let's say, if you did 1.5 million and put the million for the roads in the budget, it's the same thing. Why is there any reason not to do that?
So you're saying, I don't want to go back and forth either, but you're saying put the $1.5 million in from the fund balance and then put it on the budget side.
Yeah.
It's the fund balance as revenue.
What's that?
It lists the fund balance as revenue line.
Yeah.
The appropriation of revenue line. Stating the cost of the budget.
this is a philosophical discussion about how we want to fund things, and I think the Board of Finance historically has been very resistant to use fund balance to buy down the mill rate. Basically, it's a decision that they make, and that's just a philosophy. Because once you start doing that, the next year you're going to have a deeper hole to dig yourself out of. So
you're doing the same thing by putting it, as a special appropriation.
Right, I'm not going to have back and forth between, with all due respect to our first selectman.
Is there any opportunity for us to have a back and forth so we can understand rather than sending messages?
So you can come by as you have before any of the Board of Finance meetings, happy to listen and, go through it. But, the issue there, and I don't want to, I'll speak for myself and probably a lot of the Board of Finance, what my stance is, if you start to use fund balance to offset the mill rate, that fund balance, I've heard 50 things already tonight. We have the Serve Club, we want to pump more into roads, you want to put money here. If you start to use that fund balance, it will be gone. What our philosophy is, if we've been using
some of the revenue off of that, so the interest we earn. And that's reoccurring revenue. I have no issue using that to offset the mill rate, put it in our operating budget. And those are the things that Peggy's right. I will speak for myself, reluctant. If we spend that down, it's not there anymore. And we just saw the health insurance, skyrocket. If something goes wrong, we're gonna be in a hole. So I think we just gotta be careful. I understand, believe me, every dollar we spend comes from all of us, right? We're all living, we're all taxpayers. I get that. I do.
Hey, let me ask this question. So going forward with what you said, we're going to put it in as a special appropriation. And then if something happens, we can't afford to do it, you don't bring it up. Is that correct?
First of all, that's what Peggy said. Doesn't mean the Board of Finance agreed. I want to be clear about
Okay,
that.
So first of all, this is not part of the budget. What I'm explaining though is that we were recommending that in order to get our rating up, we do the special appropriation, right? That doesn't mean the budget doesn't work. If the budget passes and the appropriation doesn't pass, we're still going to pave a bunch of roads. We still have money in CIP. We're still going to keep to our road paving stuff thing. But if we want to spend our money on roads, well, here's a way to do it without putting another $1 million out of the budget and busting the mill rate up so high, right? So that you're not paying a much higher rate in taxes. This is a way to get both.
Jim and Peggy,
Right,
out of respect to everyone else here, Jim, you want to continue with your questions, please, and we'll continue with those.
Yeah. So, my last point on it is,
People, so maybe we can hear from some other
Well, listen,
people.
I want to go move on to the next person. I don't think it's fair. There's other people here, there's other people virtually. Go
well, let me make one quick.
ahead, Jim. Floor is yours.
So if you're doing it the way that you say, the only choice we have down the road is to do roads or not roads. If it's in the budget and people think it's too much, they could vote the budget down and say, take out the turf field, take out the police garage. You take that opportunity away from the people.
There's money in the budget to do the roads. She's talking about doing
Then
action. Right?
Right.
Our capital projects are funded not annually, they're funded through a 5-year savings plan. So when you vote for a budget, you're just voting on how much money you want to put into the savings account. You're not voting on the project in year 3 or the project in year 5.
One.
So you're voting for the year, right? And then the spending is separate from what we put into the savings account. Some of these projects are multi-year projects. So you're pulling some money out of the savings account every year to pay for the project. That's how you have to manage large capital, plans.
Same thing with the truck, projects, and 5 years.
Yeah, same here with the fire trucks. I mean, all of this, it's savings accounts. That's how much are we going to put into the savings account?
Right. I get it. But your accounts were off 5.8 million last year. You had the extra funds because you were over budget on projects.
All right, Jim, thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anybody in person? Go back to virtually. Anybody, Gene, anybody else virtually?
No.
Anybody else in person? Second, third time, public information session is closed. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. We do appreciate your time and you being here, and now the Board of Finance, you guys are going to give it a 2-minute break, and then we'll go with it. Thank you. We have to move.
Let's go for silent.